Alrighty, recording is starting. And the agenda should be in the calendar invite for anyone who needs it. I put both a Word copy and the link to the agenda on LIMS. Does anyone have anything they wanted to add to what I threw on this agenda before we get started?
Not here.
Awesome. In that case, we can start with just talking through the city gender inclusivity training. I don't personally have a ton of updates since what I shared last month around still trying to figure out where in the city we're going to hold like responsibility for the contract for this training. That is in process right now, but I don't have like a final update on how we're moving forward on that. But I do know in the last few months we've talked some about, like, a couple folks have volunteered that they would be willing to be on the like interview panel who interviews the potential trainers, because we're going to have folks like submit an application to be one of our contractors and then maybe want to do some level of interview. And I wanted to leave a little space today if folks had wanted to brainstorm like any questions they wanted to make sure we got answered by our potential trainers to ensure that whoever was hired is a good fit for doing this work for the city. Sure.
So if I was going to consider applying to be a potential trainer, should I jump off this call?
This is track. I think I would want to like give folks these questions in advance regardless.
Oh, sure.
So it feels fine to me if it feels fine to you.
It feels fine to me. I just didn't want to be like weird about it or like non-transparent about it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Cool.
In that case, what do we want to be making sure we're asking folks to see that they're a good fit for doing this training for the city?
This is Ray. I'm kind of torn about whether this is a good space for us to give opportunity for new trainers or if we want to make sure people have some experience. Honestly, my instinct is for people who have some experience training because it's not community-based, it's like city staff. So I think asking some kind of questions that get at what experience they've had before. And maybe we can couch that and like tell us about a time like a training started going awry and how did you handle it in the space or something. And then that gets at like how they think about teaching and holding space, and they will have to name that they've done it before to answer that. So.
So this is Shore. And my first time at this committee meeting. And so is this for like kind of like the next version of like transgender expansive competency training? So I think that's some things that I would want to know and would hope to provide is like my approach to teaching and bringing people into conversation about gender. and how to support people in learning and unlearning what is so deeply indoctrinated in each of us about gender. So like, how do you approach supporting people in learning about that and doing that work? And then the other pieces are, how do you incorporate intersectionality and racial justice and racial equity and various other pieces of intersectionality within a curriculum about gender or trans identities. And if this is like kind of a next steps training, because I know that Tyree did like a first, like, and I haven't seen that, so I honestly am not really sure what I'm speaking to. But I feel like where a lot of facilitating and training kind of ends for groups or organizations is like, okay, we got kind of like the core competencies done, and like we want to do some like more action-based work or like planning for how do we improve our organization. And so I think that's really important for where the city's at, is like, we have a trans equity council, we've done a little bit of training, okay, what is next? And so like asking the trainer, like, how do you approach moving people from learning into action within their organization? So those are some of my initial thoughts.
Becca, go for it.
Hi, it's Becca. One of the things we had talked about before was how do we make the training more than just an event and make it, this is kind of what Shore just reminded me of, how do we kind of take it forward past being just a training event and being changed. So I'm wondering if we can structure a question for potential trainers about how they see training fitting into culture change and whether or not they can provide guidance or follow-up materials so that we can do ongoing or follow-up communication to the people who have received training. I guess I'm fumbling a little bit with my idea, but how do we turn it from literally being a one-time event or a once annually into something that we can, point to a follow-up communication or a team meeting with the supervisor where they remind folks they went through this training.
This is Shore. I think that's a really great question, and I think that is really dependent on the types of resources that the city wants to put into this moving forward. Which is like the constant question, right? Is like, you can have somebody come do like that moving into action piece, but then beyond that, if the staff who is engaging in the training or the department or the organization more broadly isn't going to commit to either staff time or retaining a facilitator to then continue the conversation and then actually support people into moving towards action or systems change or some sort of shift, then then there's like the people who are committed who will remain committed and maybe like spark some interest in some new folks, but it's a really hard thing if the department or if the organization more broadly isn't going to commit some sort of resources to committing to the work. At least that's my experience.
This is Becca. Not to derail the conversation about what questions we would ask, but we don't have a firm commitment, right? We're still in the process where we would be proposing and advocating for a certain level of training and engagement. Is that true?
This is track. We have a commitment from both HR and race equity to look for the money to figure out how to make this happen. Because of budget cuts, there isn't the money set aside the way there was in the past, but both departments/divisions are committed to making this happen. What we haven't figured out and don't have a commitment around yet is like a second level training. I know when Tyre was offering the like gender inclusivity 101 training, the TEC had talked about, could we have a second level? And I think there's space to try, since we're looking for a new trainer anyway, to like restructure the curriculum to be more action oriented to begin with. But what we don't have a promise that we can figure out infrastructure for right now is like 2 levels of trainings essentially. But there is a commitment to finding money for 1 level at the least.
Thank you.
And this is track. Destiny, if I misspoke on any of that, obviously you're the other person who's like in a professional context. So please feel free to add or clarify.
I think you are capturing everything very accurately, track. So thank you.
This is Ray again. I'm also wondering about how we can steer what kind of trainers we have on the list. What's our kind of position on, is it okay for cis people to train? How do we want to like center and pay trainers of color? And that's a really hard thing to bring into an interview. But thinking that that's going to be really important so that we don't end up with a list where we're like, ooh, boy, this doesn't reflect community in the way we want to.
This is Hunter. This is Hunter. And I agree with Ray. And also, we need to look at disability groups as well. So consider that someone who's deaf or deaf plus, people who have experience with training as well, and with transgender and race. So that would be my 2 cents. And cisgender, there are so many different opportunities for individuals who are cisgender already. So that's my thought.
This is Shore. Don't you love how Hunta said that way more diplomatically than I did? Hunta, I put in the chat, if y'all hire cis people, I'm gonna have a heyday with that. Mostly to qualify, because I think that there's a lot of really wonderful, competent trainers and facilitators who identify as trans or gender nonconforming or non-binary or lots of other identities that could provide this training and should be compensated to do so. But that's just me. And agreed to everything else that Hunter said.
Sure, you know, you're bad.
What?
Hunt just said, short, you're bad, you know?
I also agree with what Ray said in the comments that having somebody as a cis counterpart to do like some mirroring and holding cis people accountable is really nice. I do that a lot in trainings about race for like as a white person. And so I agree with that, like that can be a really nice dynamic so that the trans facilitators and trainers don't have to like always take on like microaggressions and re-traumatizing themselves. And yeah, I'll stop.
This is Ray. Thanks. And I see Ash. Yeah, that's been helpful for you too. I don't know if that's necessary here. I think we should probably have a stable of just trans trainers and that would work well. But I was just saying, in general, there may be situations where it really helps, or we may get into certain departments that are going to be more resistant. We're bringing in a cis person or prepping someone in the room who isn't a trainer but can help manage the space. I think that should always be a factor.
This is track. I will say, and many of you who had said that you either were trainers or new trainers got an email from me about this. I have been doing outreach for a specific org that reached out looking for trainers, and so have been kind of compiling a list specifically of trans folks who do this work, preferably BIPOC and or disabled and or femme folks, and have also been kind of related to the question about a counterpart, but differently, compiling a list of folks who said they want to get into this work but don't have the experience in it yet, so that if any of the interested trainers would be interested in like mentoring someone into giving the trainings with them for a bit of additional compensation, that could be another way to support more people in getting into this work as well. So yes, echoing everything about representation. And I know that I am definitely not reaching everyone we should, but have been intentional about starting to do outreach and compile a list. Destiny, I saw your hand up and then down, so I don't know if that was on purpose.
No, I just wanted to thank you. This is Destiny. I just wanted to add that we had this discussion of this exact question in our conversation with our Chief HR Officer, Patience, and Don Baker and Joy as well. And we want to make sure that we have a diverse pool of individuals to consider. Definitely folks who are trans identified or GNC identified, fluid identified. We want to be able to definitely include that in as a preference as well. Chuck, do you recall if we had talked further up on that? But I know that that was definitely expressed as a preference.
Yeah, this is track, not to my memory, but I do remember that conversation. Kind of on that note, the next thing I wanted to run by you all is whether there was anyone else I should be reaching out to, particularly for, there's a local shelter that had reached out to me because they want to figure out how to do trans equity work internally and kind of expressed it like, we don't know where to start and want someone to do an assessment of their work. So I emailed the folks who had said that they were trainers or new trainers, but if anyone has anyone else I should be reaching out to about that opportunity, again, either folks who already do this work or folks who would want to get into this work, if someone could mentor them, if you can either unmute and share names, websites, whatever, or put them in the chat, I want to make sure that we're reaching as many folks as possible, both for an ongoing list for this internal training and for this connection asked to make. This is track. If no one has anyone else, that is totally fine, because I also know we've in some ways asked this question multiple times. Does anyone have anything else about interview questions or the city training before we move into the next agenda item?
This is Hunter, and yeah, I do have a question. When we're looking at the question about disability, to be sure that it's inclusive of deaf, blind, hard of hearing, as well as other disabilities. So just wanted to say that.
This is track. Thank you, Hunter. Absolutely. This is track. If no one has anything else, the next item on the agenda was talking about the training for ASL interpreters. I will give the update I have on my end, which is that Nick from NCR is meeting with his supervisor this afternoon to try to figure out what funding is possible for that. I was hoping that they would connect before this meeting and I would have an update to give you in the meeting. Realistically, I'm probably going to end up sending you a follow-up email with what Nick tells me when I send you the minutes. His office has been made responsible for a lot of things that are not their jobs recently, which is not necessarily an excuse for the time this has taken, but also maybe helpful context. And I think his supervisor is managing 17 new people right now. So it's been a little hectic there. But I will hopefully have information from him about funding by the end of today, and can send it out to you all. I don't have more on that front. Hunter, I don't know if there are things you wanted to update anyone on about the plans for that training.
This is Hunter. Sure, I could. Me and my co-presenter, Lucian, we have been talking, and really can't believe that next month is already April. So we did send out a flyer, and hold on one second, to Minnesota Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. They've got the RID CEUs, the registry, what is this? So the RID is the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. And so it seems like everything should be in line. So if track, if we don't know yet if it's going to be paid, or if you still need me to put a logo on there. Is that the case? I don't know. I'm still waiting for an answer from you about that one.
This is track. Sorry, I didn't realize you were waiting. Don't put a logo on there. Don't put a logo on there. I think putting city logos on things is going to make it much more complicated. And even if we get the funding figured out, it is not officially a TEC event. It would actually be very hard to get you paid for it if it was a TEC event in some form. It is just a thing that the TEC has helped support make happen. Don't put a logo on it.
All right. So now that I've gotten that information, I can tell Lucian to hit the send button. So thank you for that. Also, we are talking about our presentation, the PowerPoint, everything should be wrapped up by tomorrow. And yep. That would be it.
This is track. Amazing. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about any of that?
This is Hunter, and really for right now, it's more that we are going back and forth with ASLAS, and it was sign is actually going back and forth a little contentiously. So we're going back and forth and talking about, should we tell them to, if the communication with ASLAS, we're trying to make it happen on a national forum. Yeah, where it would if people are there and they can watch the whole thing, or if it's going to be just clips of it, where we can put information on our PowerPoint. That really impacts our trans community who are feeling not respected, with not honoring pronouns, our names. There are so many mistakes out there, including in captioning as well. It's been pretty bad. And we can't let that happen. We can't let it continue to happen. So after the interpreter training, and if it's all done, then we would expect that for real, that it would progress from here on. And so I don't think it would be a one-time training. I think it would be reminders as well, refresher trainings.
This is track, particularly if this is happening partially on a national level. I assume you are, but just confirming, like, is there targeted advertising happening to a lot of the interpreters who interpret locally to, like, make sure that, like, we would have plenty of folks who would feel prepared for the summit and stuff like that? Because I know that part of the reason that we would hopefully be able to get funding from neighborhood and community relations is kind of like ensuring that we have people trained before the summit. So I want to make sure that will be the case.
Exactly. Yep. That is it. And, that wasn't the first time. Again, recently it was even worse. On a virtual thing. Oh, it was so much worse. It just needs to stop. So we're taking this step, and, we had to do, it's like hitting the brakes. We have to do a timeout now to be sure that everyone's trained. But I do promise you that things will get better. It'll change, but I can't guarantee for other interpreters, if they're really getting it, if they're interested, or if they're kind of missing the point, or if they already think they know it all. Often people feel that people think that my training is Trans 101, and it's not. So.
This is track. Totally. Thank you, Hunter. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, the last thing I had on the agenda was checking in about training for the new encampment outreach teams at both the city and the park board. I reached out to, so there's 3 new encampment outreach staff at the city, whose roles were funded in the 2021 budget for the first time. Hunter, is that a question for me?
I'm sorry. Yep. And I'm sorry. Could you repeat again? Who is it for? It was the
yeah.
Hunter saw an acronym like MPR. Is that what you said? Can you repeat that?
The park board is Minnesota Parks and Recreation Board, MPRB. Yeah, not the radio station. Thank you for clarifying. Yes.
That's what I wanted to know. Okay.
Yes. And so there are 3 new staff at the city. I've connected to their supervisors, and their supervisors are very interested in them getting trained, and we're actually like, why don't we have gender inclusivity training for all of our new staff at orientation? And I was like, it's a great question. It's because we don't have any of this training for our new staff at orientation and have not gotten, that has not been an option yet, but are interested in getting their staff trained. I also connected to Elise, E-L-I-S-E. I'm really bad at spelling names out loud, who used to be on the TEC and works for the park board, and wants to talk to us about what they can do to train new encampment outreach staff. All of which, so a lot of great buy-in. The flaw, of course, being that we don't actually have a contract with a trainer right now. And at the pace city contracts happen, we would not have a long-term contract with someone until June at the earliest if we got going immediately, because the finance process is slow. So I wanted to bring that all to you to be like, here's some good news. Here's the barrier. I don't know if anyone is interested. I don't know if folks have initial thoughts. I feel like the initial directions I could see us going were either like the TEC being interested in offering one training, not as an ongoing commitment, but as a way to do this, or us seeing if we could find money to like just pull someone in to give a one-off training, but not being able to promise them the longer term contract. If it was someone who was interested in that, they would still have to reapply for that. Yeah, it is not a perfect situation. I'm open to other ideas as well, but that's kind of where that's at, and I wanted to check in with you all.
This is Becca. Can you give me the 2 or 3 sentence reminder on what the goal for this is? That would help me understand what solutions might match.
Yeah, this is track. Thank you. The goal essentially is making sure that any staff who are doing outreach and encampments like have the basic competency to be treating the trans folks they're interacting with decently. And there are other city and park board staff who do work one-on-one with community, but because these were new hire roles and because we know trans folks disproportionately experience homelessness, we kind of jumped on this as like, can we get these people trained?
Track, this is Ray. Do you know when these workers are going to start? Are they already going out and making contact with folks?
This is track. I'm not sure the park board staff are yet, but I believe the city staff are because they've gone through all of their new employee orientation. So they will be out soon if they aren't yet.
So this is Becca again. So I hear that this is time sensitive, which on one hand makes me think putting any resources in front of the staff doing the interactions is good. But I worry about not having complete training for them on all subjects. You know, part of my background was at the county. I had a minor role involved in training at one point and actually doing training. And I don't feel that, I know enough about what city staff really need to know to be completely effective. But then I worry about, like I said, the fact that it is time sensitive And if they've had no training whatsoever before they go out and interact with members of the community, what does that mean? So I realize I'm speaking to 2 points without having a solution, but I'm wondering if others have ideas along those lines.
This is Ray. I don't know. I mean, is it a both and? Because presumably this is going to be ongoing work on their part. There's not just one chance to get them up to speed. Could we get kind of a packet together to start while we figure out the training piece, and that can come as soon as we hire trainers?
This is track Ray and Becca as folks who I know both were involved in like doing this training in an employee resource group capacity at one point or another. Do you have like basic packet materials that you would give to folks that you feel like we could pull from a little bit if needed, and then make sure that like they got through the training with a new contractor once we had someone under contract?
This is right. It was more of a slide deck with participatory aspects. It definitely wasn't designed to be a paper packet. So I'm trying to think. I mean, there are some really common resources that are not always well loved, like gender unicorn type stuff, definitional type stuff. I mean, just the terminology would be helpful, and a couple of articles. But no, I mean, I wouldn't say I have a packet. Becca, do you magically have a packet?
This is Becca. No, all my resources like that went poof when I left the county. I do like the idea of creating some sort of quick, I hate to say quick reference guide, but for folks who have no other context, you know, what could an education guide look like while we work on a solution that is long term, to provide full training.
This is track. I definitely don't have a packet or anything. I think I have other people's slide decks saved in various places. The most I have is we wrote up a page for the city on why pronouns are important. That is what links to the pronouns in people's signatures. So I have like a little bit of language around like asking pronouns, respecting pronouns, why that matters. That is obviously not all that trans equity is, but if that is useful as a resource to pull together in some sort of like very quick written up thing, that already exists.
This is Ray. So that, some definitions would be good. Terminology. And I'm wondering if for this group it would be helpful to pull data from the latest Wilder report on homelessness in Minnesota, so that they can have an understanding about why. I mean, we should bring it up in every community, but why it may be even more important when they're working with unhoused folks, kind of give some context from their own field.
This is Ash, ASH. I do have like a written like gender diversity, gender inclusion guide that I made for like, my own use to share with folks. So I'd be happy to like collaborate with someone and like pull content from there, and make something that's like a little more tailored to this need if anyone's interested.
Yeah, this is Becca. I like the idea. In my mind, I think it's worth us exploring creating an education guide of some kind. And then seeing where we go with it. So I would definitely be willing to look at a draft or help organize a draft.
This is Track. Thank you both a lot for being willing to do this. I don't want the TEC to be the go-to place for people who need training, because that's not what you all signed up to do. But I think if we're able to pull together existing resources for this while we get someone under contract, that would be wonderful. And Ash and Becca, I can send over to you like the pronoun page and anything else I have, if you want to incorporate those, if they feel helpful, and if they don't, also totally fine. Oh, Potato's joining the meeting. Awesome, and I see Shore's offer as well. I will email the three of you with what I have. Thank you all so much. Does anyone have any? I know I'm meeting with Elise from the park board next week. Does anyone, and I think Ray is maybe coming if they can, does anyone have any feedback, questions, anything they want me bringing into that meeting?
This is Becca. Did you have specific topics you're going to bring up already? I'm just curious.
This is tracked not fully. Like Elise was just curious what you all were trying to do at the city, so I was mostly going to report back on the conversation that happened here and kind of the like, a fuller training feels important. This is what is being cobbled together immediately. Literally what we just talked about. And I think she also understands the importance of this, but I'm happy to speak to that if that ends up being helpful. She mostly was just curious what the city was trying to do.
This is Shore, and yes, this is Potato. Track, you should probably add Potato to the who was present at the meeting now. Fully present.
This is Track. I don't think I can do that.
I'm just playing.
I know. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to check in about with these last 3 minutes?
This is Hunter, not from me. I'm just looking forward to surgery soon. That's it. With these trainings, et cetera, that we're talking about, they're talking about that starting soon. And once we get it nailed down, ready to go. Also, just to one last thing before we close, I have been getting fairly aggravated with parents who are making this crazy suggestion of this bill about transgender kids being penalized for being involved in sports. Like, just spread the word out there to people. Shoot that bill down. Really, that's all I gotta say. It's crazy.
Yeah, this is Becca. I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
This is Chuck. I'm with you.
It feels like it's changing. What is this called? Converting. Helping to convert people. It's saying that it's illegal. Like, what's going to be next? I mean, come on. What do they want? Mm-mm.
Well, sending care to everyone. I hope you get some time outside and away from transphobic legislation.
And away from what?
Transphobic legislation.
Thank you.
My Wi-Fi is not cooperating.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, potato.
Bye.